Have you ever lost a chess game and wondered what did I do wrong? Today we are diving into the 10 most common reasons why players lose game, and more importantly, how to avoid making these mistakes. Quick spoiler, reason 8 is a mistake that even experienced players make. Reason 1 is not developing pieces correctly, moving too many pawns or focusing only on one side of the board. So, the solution is follow the principle. Develop minor pieces, knight and bishop before the queen, and connect your rooks. So, here we are black, and white opens with e4. We have e6, and after a sequence of moves, here we are not developing the pieces correctly, and after d5, we have e5 and pam, the queen is trapped. So, we shouldn't play like this, and this is how we should play. So e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, knight c3, knight f6, and just the normal moves, developing the pieces, first the minor pieces, and then when you are ready developing the queen, now our rook are connected, and we can start the action. So let's go to number 2. Reason 2 is neglecting the king, so failing to castle or leaving the king exposed. The solution is castle as early as possible and build a solid pawn structure around the king. Okay, this is what happens if you neglect your king. Here, white simply develops in the style that we saw in the first point, and the error is this one, because black started the action without having castle, and here the position is already lost, because after this sequence of moves there is pretty force, otherwise black lose a piece. Here we have a simple tactic, and we gain a piece. Let's go further. 3. Underestimating center control. Moving pieces to the edge without fighting for the center. So, control the center with pawns and pieces to gain more flexibility. Okay, here white will develop toward the center of the board and black will play on the rim, but without doing mistakes, just strange moves. Here the problem is that black didn't even try to cause any trouble to white position, and white can do what they want, and white can already start an attack with h4, h5, and maybe trade bishop h6, and here if black keeps doing his stuff without focusing on the center of the board, here comes an attack, and this is already lost. After king g8, it follows the mate. Let's go to number 4. 4. Making moves too fast. Playing without considering what your opponent is threatening. Always ask yourself, what is my opponent threatening? Okay, in this position we are black and it's our turn, so we have to do a decision. And here we could take a pawn, but if we check the material, we are equal material, but our pieces are super active. So here we are better for sure. And here we say, you know what, this bishop and this queen are lined up to this file, to this diagonal. So let's take a pawn, and if white retakes, we can simply play this, and now the rook is pinned to the king. And if the pawn takes, instead we can play something like knight g7, and then start to build an attack. So here we take the pawn. But this is a blunder, because we didn't ask ourselves what is white threatening, and here white can sacrifice the queen. So here it follows queen takes h6, h7, king takes, rook h3, check, king g8, and mate. And here we lose. A better move, instead of taking the pawn, was simply to play bishop e5, and with bishop e5 white has nothing, and here it will follow knight c3, but then f takes e3, and after rook takes we can retreat the bishop, and we are completely fine in this position, and we are winning. Number 5 is playing too passively, over-defending without looking for active counterplay. Always seek opportunities for counterplay, even under pressure. Okay, this is what happens if you play too passively. Here, this is a game of one of my tournaments, and I am white and my opponent is black. And after these moves, I'm just developing the pieces, and my opponent is playing, as you can see, my opponent is playing too passively. He is not controlling the center. He didn't develop the pieces correctly, as I as we said before. And here he keeps playing passively, so just a queen d6 because maybe he wants to push on e6 or maybe on g6. And you can also see that he doesn't really have a plan because now queen d6 is made to play on e6 and developing the bishop like this. But if he wants to develop the bishop like that and then castle, it's fine. The position is bad, but just do it without wasting moves. And here I can start the action after some sequence of moves. Again, playing too passively. Here, the move should have been bishop g7, but he played e6, and here I started the action with a bishop f4. I sacrificed a pawn only to gain activity, and then with some sacrifice, I won the game after some moves. I won material, and in the end, I deliver checkmate. Well, he resigned here, but it is what it is. Number 6, missing simple tactics. So losing material to tactics like fork, pins, or double attack. Practice daily puzzle and improve your puzzle skills. Number 7, ignoring piece safety, leaving pieces underprotected or poorly positioned. Always ask yourself if your pieces are protected and how can you improve their position. This is a classic position from the Rui Lopez. So here we enter in the Rui Lopez. And after this sequence of moves, here black is threatening to capture the knight because if the queen recapture, then it will follow e takes d4, c takes d4, and knight takes d4. So here white moves um, bishop e3, and here the bishop is cutting off the file from the rook, so the rook was defending the e4 pawn, and black snatched this pawn, but in fact this is a mistake because these two pieces are not protected. So here we have bishop d5, and this knight can't move because the rook is hanging, and if this knight moves, this knight will be taken, and here white will take at least two pieces for one rook, or well, it will gain material. Number 8, playing without a plan. So, doing random moves without considering longer term goals. Always ask yourself what is the reason of the position. So, king attack, control of the center, and what are the key squares and what are the weak squares. This game is from one of my tournaments, and I am black, and my opponent is white, and is black to move, and we can evaluate the position for a moment to find a plan. And as we can see, the f7 pawn, it can be a target with rook f5 and knight e5, and the rook is targeting the f7 square, and the queen, sorry, is also preventing the rook to become active from b8 because also the b7 pawn is threatening. But the nice thing is that my opponent has a isolated pawn. And how do you play against an isolated pawn? You want to put your pieces in this case in the d file to prevent a pawn push, and you want to trade some pieces as more as possible because then with for example without knight without the knight, the queen, and one of the rooks, this pawn start to be really weak. So the move that solves all my problem is queen e6, because now if there is a queen trade, the knight will become active, and this rook from b8 it will be able to move. And we also trade some pieces to end up in an endgame with this pawn that is weak. My opponent traded, and this is not the best move. So I took, and now again, this move is not the best because he can trade, and now he will no longer have an isolated. Well, he will have an isolated pawn, but I will not be able to target that pawn from behind because there will be one of my pawns. But he didn't. He didn't trade, and he played rook e1. So now I just double up, and as you can see, he didn't have a plan, and he did the game because I had nothing to do. I had nothing to think, and he did all the moves for me. I just bring the king active, and once he traded, this pawn is not protected enough, so I will be able to win that pawn. And in the end, I won this game. So let's go to the next one. Number nine, lack of endgame knowledge. Losing positions because you don't know endgame basics. Study fundamental concepts like opposition, triangulation, and pawn endgames. This position is a draw, but if black doesn't have endgame knowledge, he will lose this game. Here, white is white to move, and white moves king e5. So here there is only one move that draw the game, and it is in fact king d7. But if black doesn't know the theory, he will play king d8, thinking, okay, white will push the pawn, so let's go near the square of promotion. So if black plays this, then it comes king d6, and after king c8, king c6. Here we have the opposition, and yeah, well, if black moves on d8, but even on b8 is the same, you will go in the other way with the king, and then you will promote the pawn. The right move in this situation was king d7, because after king d7, if white tries to promote the pawn like c6, then king c7, king c5, and you just stay under the pawn, behind the pawn, sorry, and well, if white goes, for example, on d6, you will go on opposition on d8, but if white goes on b8, b6, same, uh, king b8, and yeah, so after some sequence, there is a stalemate here, and in fact, black draw this game. So always know, always have some endgame knowledge. This endgame is quite basic, but there are other stuff like a bishop pair, or even sometimes is a draw even when your opponent is up a bishop and a pawn, and you have only the king. If the bishop is if the pawn is on the H file or on the A file, and the promotion square is of the opposite color of the bishop. So always study the endgames, because you can save a lot of games by drawing, or you can win a lot of games by not end game, not end in drawing drawish positions. Let's go to the next one. The last but not the least, number 10, not learning from losses. So repeating the same mistakes because you don't analyze your games. Review your games, even the online one, to identify and learn from your errors. So for today's video is everything. I hope you like it. If you didn't do it yet, feel free to subscribe, and see you in the next video.